welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. Welcome to all the familiar faces. It's good to see you on this Friday, and I hope it's the beginning of a great weekend for everyone. Hello, two sisters in some yarn. What's up? Late and Keri. Hey, see, Highness, I have a town alarm that goes off here at noon, so I have to wait. I have a legitimate reason to be 3 minutes late. Anywhere than that, then yes, I'm also adding to it. But I guess I could just go live and you guys could hear the alarm. It's kind of funny. Like living in a very small town like this, there's some really just interesting things you don't get in a bigger town. Anyway, welcome all. This is a live show we do Mondays and Fridays where we talk about things that are in the news, things that's on our mind, and basically we just figure out how to survive and have laughs together in a crazy world and retain our joy. That's what we do here. So if you are a regular viewer and you like the show, of course, we have ways you can support the channel. If you want to become a paid subscriber, you can do so for as little as $1 a month here at YouTube, at Locals, at Patreon, or Subscribe Star is probably the best place. Also, if you're new, we hope you enjoy it. There's a lot of different viewpoints in the chat, so feel free to speak your mind if you have something to say. In general, everything is allowed in the chat, and people are usually managed to be very civil with one another, even when they disagree. So that's what we aim for. So welcome. If you guys were hanging out last night on my Carlos channel, I got to do a conversation. It was just a hanging out party kind of session with him and my friend Greg Wilson and Brian, the Front Porch Conservative. That was a lot of fun. And hello to some of the familiar faces who were there last night. I also was on a channel this week called the Welsh Republic Podcast. They're a smaller channel here at YouTube. If you get a chance, go check him out. He's based in New Zealand, and his first channel was banned by YouTube, so he had to start all over. It's called Welsh Republic 2 because his first one was taken down because I believe he had Chrissy Mayer as a guest, and they made some jokes or talked about January 6th, and so he lost his whole channel and is starting over. Anyway, that was fun. He was very charming gentleman, and he asked me, we talked about, people are used to me talking about culture and woke and my experience leaving social justice, but we talked about cowboy boots for quite a bit. We talked about culture too, but it was fun because he's, I got to just hang out and talk about things I talk about in real life a lot with people, and my dog. So go check that one out if you're interested. Hello, Pirate Tomsky. So I've got a couple things that I've been reading this week. Now that we're back from our trip, my husband and I have been paying more attention to the news and paying more attention to the news cycle, I should say. And there's several things I haven't talked about yet that we can cover. Hello, Horny Elf. Horny Elf is here from the Legion of Memers. Hello, sir. Hello, alien, I should say. The first thing is this Ben and Jerry's thing, which, if you haven't seen it, I'd be kind of surprised because this one has been everywhere. If you haven't seen it, maybe you've been on a trip or a vacation like I was. But here, let's put this one on the screen. This one, I think this is one of those stories that went big for a reason because, every day there's something new and woke. There's actually hundreds, thousands of new things that people are reacting to and noticing that are happening, and they're highlighting and they're trying to use them as examples of, hey, this is why this ideology is bad. So there's always something new. This is one of the ones that I can understand why this story went viral, and I'm glad it did because I think it points to hypocrisy, the hypocrisy of my old ideology of social justice, of woke, whatever you want to call it. So if you missed it, on Independence Day, Ben and Jerry's decided to become, give us a moral lecture. This is something that in my old belief system, people really enjoy doing on occasions when other people are having fun and are having joy. So they like to do this on holidays, especially holidays that are about celebrating something, so celebrating Thanksgiving, and they love doing this on Thanksgiving. They also do it on Independence Day because it's about our nation's founding and about celebrating our country and our independence. They enjoy doing it on, I mean, even for minor things, like I've seen this happen where someone's child was graduating from high school and posted some celebratory pictures that day, and it happened to be one of the days that they were doing everybody's doing the black square online, and so her child got piled on because she didn't post the black square. It's like, how dare you celebrate your graduation today when we're all posting the black square in solidarity, right? So it's a real feature of social justice ideology, of the woke ideology, that like resentment can be in any belief system. Resentment and misery and, being the enemy of joy, that can take over, and it anything. It's not relegated just to this one space. However, I will say in social justice, in woke ideology, it tends to be a dominant feature, resentment. They tend to explicitly attack expressions of joy and celebrations on holidays like this. So all that build up to explain, this is what Ben and Jerry's decided to do on Independence Day, which is a typically woke thing to do on a national holiday, on a day of celebration. They posted this lecture. They said, this 4th of July, and you can see it here, this 4th of July, it's high time we recognize that the U.S. exists on stolen Indigenous land and commit to returning it. Okay. Learn more and take action now at Ben & Jerry's. And so this is the graphic they chose for Independence Day. It's a picture of some fireworks, but in front of the fireworks, hold on, don't have your fun. Don't have your fireworks. In front of the fireworks, they have a little shaming little message there. It's a brown hand holding a sign. It says, "This is stolen land." Hold on, no fireworks yet. And then it says, in the graphic, it says, the United States was founded on stolen Indigenous land this 4th of July. Let's commit to returning it. So this is a great tweet to go viral, because this is what is, you may have heard the phrase people use to describe this, virtue signaling. This is what's known as virtue signaling. In the old days, I mean, there's all kinds of virtue signaling as well. I think the oldest type I've ever seen described is in the Bible, where they talk about the Pharisees who stand on the street corners and pray in public so that they may be seen praying. Not that there's anything wrong with public prayer, but the Pharisees and the human characteristic, the type of human that Bible verse is talking about, is the type who prays publicly so that they may be seen praying. It's so that they get the public accolades for it, right? It's the whole purpose of them doing it is to be seen doing it and to affect what people think of them. It's all about their ego, their outward appearance to the world, their mask, or what have you. That's what this is. That's what virtue signaling is. Virtue signaling is when they make a statement like this so that they may be seen doing it. Ben and Jerry's is making this statement. They're virtue signaling. So on the 4th of July, you can be, they're so moral. They're such good guys. They care so much, right? Like the rest of us are out here unthinkingly celebrating and, just reveling and celebrating the independence of our country and having a good time. And how dare we? We're just unkind, unthinking people, right? That's what's meant by this. We just don't care as much as they do. So they post this to show how much they care. And the best thing happened. This tweet went viral. And of course, people were saying, well, if you're saying the U.S. exists on stolen Indigenous land and you're telling us all we need to commit to returning it, what are you doing to return the land that your company headquarters exist on? Where are your company headquarters? They're in Vermont? Okay. So people started looking into that, and then this happened. I'm going to pull up the Newsweek link. There's several links on Fox, but I know some people have a bias against Fox. So let's pull up what some of you call mainstream link, but mainstream currently is pretty leftist. You may not agree yet, but you will eventually. Let's pull up a Newsweek link about this. So then this happened. This is amazing. This is why this is one of the good stories to keep pushing on. I think out of all the different things that come up every day and the different woke things you can push on, this is a good one to stay on top of, because this one again is about one particular facet of woke ideology. It's their hypocrisy. It's their attempt to shame any type of joy or celebration, and it's about their virtue signaling. Those three things kind of wrap together. Okay, so to the point of the hypocrisy. So an Indigenous chief stepped forward. He stepped forward and was like, "Hello, Ben and Jerry's. Your company headquarters in Vermont happens to be located on land that used to belong to my tribe, and I'd be happy to sit down with you and take you up on your offer of committing to return the stolen land." And so let's read some of this. This is just perfect. Newsweek headline. Excuse me. Indigenous chief wants to take back Ben and Jerry's headquarters built on stolen land. Why is Biden here? Go away. Okay. An Indigenous tribe descended from the Native American nation that originally controlled the land in Vermont that the Ben and Jerry's headquarters is located on would be interested in taking it back, its chief has said, after the company publicly called for stolen lands to be returned. Beautiful. Don Stevens, chief of the Nulhagan Band of the Coosac Abenaki Nation, one of 4 descended from the Abenaki that are recognized in Vermont, told Newsweek that it was, quote, always interested in reclaiming the stewardship of our lands, end quote, but that the company had yet to approach them. So you mean to tell me that this company, which is now owned and controlled by Unilever, right? Didn't Unilever buy them? So they're owned by this huge conglomerate, but they have they still have the very folksy, we're just a couple of hippies brand. That's not who they are anymore. Okay. They're owned by Unilever. So this corporate brand, are you mean to tell me that they posted a virtue signal that they had no interest in acting on themselves? You mean that they were telling everyone else that we should all give back our lands, but they had not even bothered to find out which Indigenous tribe used to own the land that they operate on? They hadn't even approached them. They hadn't even said, "Hey, before we do this tweet shaming people and saying that we should all return lands to the Native Americans, maybe we should contact the Native Americans who used to be on this land where our company headquarters is located, and we should offer to give them the land." They didn't do that. And now that he stepped forward, Don Stevens, he's been doing the media rounds. He's trying to let them know. He's trying to get in touch, let them know, "Hey, I'm here. I'm here. I saw your tweet. I'm interested. Let's have a conversation." They are ignoring this guy. They're ignoring this chief of the Coosac Abenaki Nation. As far as I know, today is the 14th. As far as I know, they still haven't reached out to him, at least publicly. I don't know of any meeting. Maybe they are in private. I assume what's happening is they're scrambling and trying to figure out what to do. And so I have some, my husband and I have been talking about this and figuring out what's going to happen. And we have a couple of ideas about what could happen. So you guys tell me in the chat what you think might happen next. So there's the possibility that they could meet with him and come up with something where I don't think in any reality are they actually going to live up to their words. You know, behavior is so much more important to look at than words. That's why there's so many Bible verses about that. I mean, that's a truth, a lesson in life is look at what people say. I mean, look at what people do, not what they say. Look at what they do, because you should be able to figure out what a person's beliefs are by their behavior. And anybody, con artists, anybody can say any number of things, but do they actually live those things? Look at it. So I don't think there's any reality in which their behavior is going to match their words. I can't imagine them. Can you imagine Unilever, this corporate conglomerate, saying, "Okay, cool. We're just going to pack up the Ben & Jerry's corporate headquarters and return this land," even for the amount of positive press coverage they would get from the woke. I still don't think they would do that. So there's the possibility they might meet with him and make a big show of meeting with him, and then come up with something different that they could do other than giving back their land. They could they might set up some fundraiser, charity, some fund, where they're going to establish this nonprofit for this particular Native American tribe. They might cut some deal with him where they're like, here's what we will do, or maybe we'll give a percentage of an ice cream brand that we're going to call Indian Giver. That's a joke. They are they not Indian givers according to the old, what that used to mean, the colloquial meaning, right? Are they not? They told the Indians, hey, we should give up the land, and then they're not willing to do it. Anyway, if they did have maybe they come up with a new flavor of ice cream, Indian Giver, and they give the proceeds of that or a percentage of that to the Abenaki Nation, they might do something like that where they try to save face, but not stand by what they said, not live up to it. So that's one possibility. I actually don't even know if they're going to go that far, though. Here's the other possibility. This is the more cynical one, and I think we might see this, so keep your eyes open. The other thing they tend to do in these kind of situations, when I say they, I mean the woke who work in the media, social media, politics, companies, conglomerates, stuff like that, they try and smear people instead. I guarantee you there's somebody on the payroll or they've hired someone to be digging through this Don Stevens background, the chief of this Indian nation, to be digging through his background to try to find anything they can. Has he ever had an affair? Has he ever had an eviction? Has he ever had a bad business dealing? Fallout with someone? They're probably digging through everything they can to try and find some kind of quote unquote dirt on him so they can change the story and the narrative in the press and smear him. And the best thing they could find, that the woke try to find, is some kind of guilt by association where they, like they're doing with that movie Sound of Freedom right now, where they're calling it like a QAnon movie. And you try and look at the connections, like how did they get there to QAnon? And it's this weird, crazy, it's a conspiracy theory of its own, actually, to link that movie to QAnon. They probably do something like that. If Don Stevens, if they find his Facebook and he's friends with anyone who's ever liked a Trump post or anyone who's ever, expressed an opinion that they can jump on and say, ha, that's a right winger, they will do that. If they can smear Don Stevens, the chief of the Abenaki Nation, as a crazy right winger, far right, Q, and whatever, what any of these slurs they come up with, if they can do that, then they can ignore this completely. They don't have to, at that point, they don't have to meet with him because they've done what they do, their magic trick. They've changed the narrative at the expense of this guy's reputation, public safety, the safety of his family, at the expense of his good name. They don't care. The woke don't care about smearing a person and just, trying to besmirch their character and good name in the public if it means they can get out of having to live the beliefs that they claim to hold. So that's the more cynical view, but I think keep your eyes open because that might be what happens. Just get ready. Get ready for Don Stevens, insurgent right-wing Native American, white supremacist Native American. Yeah, that's what's probably going to happen. Okay. Are you guys making puns? Moccasin me at your own peril. Thank you, Adam. Hello, Adam Worrell. I love it. Eat red crow flavor. Oh, man. Thank you. Those are funny. Okay. Oh, thank you for the super chat. Keith J, $2. Greetings, Keri. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to you, too, sir. I remember you. Can I call you Coach Keith? I remember you, sir. Happy Friday to you, wherever you are. I hope it's not as hot as it is here in Texas. Okay, so that's pretty much all I had to say about the Ben and Jerry's at the moment. We're gonna wait and see what happens. But again, this is one of the stories I feel like it's good to stay on top of. Oh, there is one other thing I can show you. You know what's really funny is a lot of these woke corporate brands, they don't get a lot of regular interaction on their Facebook pages. I mean, why would they? People don't interact very much with brands in general. That's why, they do a lot of promoted posts and stuff. Um, so and organizations, they don't get a lot of regular, like, return engagement on their Facebook pages or on their, Twitter accounts. So Facebook, if you happen to still be on Facebook, Facebook's pretty funny because they have this feature they've been doing for a couple years now, where if you leave, like, more than 2 or 3 comments on a business or one of these corporate brands or on a organization or something, you will get, and I have gotten these alerts that say, "Congratulations, you're a top fan of the ACLU." Once I was a top fan of the ACLU, or, in this case, I got one saying, "Congratulations, you've unlocked the top fan achievement at Ben& and Jerry's." So, then they ask you what's really funny is I don't know why, this kind of stuff makes me laugh just in general because it's just, it's just corporate, you know, corporations and big social working together to try and increase engagement with these non-personal brands just makes me laugh. And also because the comedy part of my brain immediately thinks of a character, like a sketch with someone who gets really excited, like, "Honey, get in here, get in here. I'm a top fan at Ben& and Jerry's." Like like who's I just imagine that person, like, a whole sketch around them. Maybe nobody else finds this as funny as I do, but whatever. So I got one of those really funny messages. It's like, "Congratulations, you're a top fan at Ben& and Jerry's," just for posting, like, 3 comments. So apparently they don't have a lot of repeat engagement at all because that's all it took was like 3 or 4 comments. And so on their Facebook page, they of course are completely ignoring this. They're ignoring the Native American chief, his offer to meet with them, how he says, "Yes, I'm very interested in reclaiming the land that you're on." And, they're just posting random stuff like, "Don't you want some brownie ice cream? You know you want some brownie ice cream." So, I think it's just funny to go in there. Now when I'm posting, I don't know if you can see this, but I have my little top fan thing there with an arrow pointing to it, and I'm just going in there and using the top fan, title and all the prestige that comes with it, and all of my comments are now prefaced with "As a top fan here as a top fan here at Ben& and Jerry's, I believe I speak for all top fans when I say" I just getting into that character of the person who's really excited about being the top fan, right? And, I told them they couldn't brownie nose their way out of this, just having fun with puns. I'm gonna keep having fun, it's just a bit of fun and comedy, but it's also keeping the pressure on them in each of their subsequent posts about other stuff. Uh, it's good to see there are lots of other people in there as well who keep saying like, "Hey, whatever happened with that Native American tribe that wants to meet with you? It was just like a week ago, right? Like, or 2 weeks ago. Have you done anything with that yet?" And people keep asking and they're like, "Don't you want some Rocky Road?" Like they're just totally trying to ignore it. Anyway. Yeah, if you're on Facebook, get in on that fun. It is fun. Get your top fan badge. Make a big deal out of it when you get it too. Like, do a whole thing with a trophy. Like it's so silly. Okay. Um, oh, thank you, Pyrotomsky. If you're a top fan of Keri, then hit the like button. What a great what a great way to play on this portion of the show. Yes, hit the like button. It helps the channel. That's something you can do. And you can also leave comments, helps afterwards. It helps the algorithm if it gets a lot of engagement. You might become a top fan. They don't have those here at YouTube. They just have the memberships, uh, but at Facebook they do. There is a there is a deprogrammed Facebook page. You too could become a top fan. Thank you for the super chat, Hal Scott. I recognize you. Thank you for the $10 supporting the channel. He says, "Hi, Keri. I first heard of you from the Peter Boghossian interview. I love your content. Really, because your name sounds so familiar. I thought we had known each other online anyway for a while, but I might be confusing you with someone else. Anyway, welcome. Welcome to the live show we do on Mondays and Fridays, noon Central Time. Just hang out, talk about the news, have fun with each other in a crazy world. That's what we do. Okay. And then Two Sisters and Some Yarn says, here's the Facebook page. Yes, it's facebook.com/real Keri Smith, Keri. If you want to become a top fan, then you can preface all your comments there with, I'm a top fan. As a top fan of Deprogrammed, I believe I speak on behalf of all the top fans. Oh, I love it. Okay. So that was one of the things I wanted to discuss. Here's something else. I saw this one. I think I'll save the funny thing for the end. We'll have like a big laugh at the end. So instead, um, let's talk about. Oh well, this one's just fun and interesting. Let me show you guys this. If you were watching, I think it was Monday, I showed you a couple of old books I had recently bought, and one of them I started making my way through this book. It's a beautiful book, by the way. It's no longer in print. I could barely find any information about it online. It was printed in 1894. It's a old children's book. I found this in a junk shop. It's called Happy Day Story Album, and you can see the cover there. I should just go get it. It's in the other room, but it's easier to see this. When I hold it up, the light hits it, and last time it's hard to see it. So that's the cover. And I just thought it was interesting because I'm looking through it, and it's a beautiful book. It's full of a lot of illustrations and then moral instruction. And this particular copy has a handwritten dedication on the inside where someone received this book as a gift for good attendance at a temperance society, which in the late 1800s, especially in the UK, these were these organizations where they would meet and they were pushing for abstinence. They were pushing for abstinence with alcohol, like no drinking. These are teetotalers. So someone received this book for good attendance at a temperance society, and it was signed in the year 1900, which is pretty cool. So on the inside, though, here's what first thing I see, first story. So it's about a little kid, and it's called Mother's Love. And it says, Harry is very fond of stories and pictures. At the mention of storybook, he will leave rocking horse, wagon, wheelbarrow, and dolls. Parentheses, Harry loves dolls. And struggle on to mother's knee. He's never so happy as when mother is reading to him. And it goes on about how much he loves when mom reads to him, and maybe one day when mom is old and gray, he will read to her. And so, but what was interesting about it is I've seen a lot of pictures of little boys from this time period, and a lot of times they were dressed a little bit more feminine than we're used to in modern culture, at least until recently. They're a little bit more feminine, even also, I mean, much later, 50, 60 years after this, when around the time my dad was born, I've seen pictures of my dad as a baby where he was dressed a little bit more feminine than we were used to when I was a kid. And the thing that also struck me here is that they say Harry loves dolls. Like, it's not a big deal. They're like, this is 1894, and they're like, this little boy loves dolls. So it just made me think about how being gender nonconforming, which is what we call it nowadays, gender nonconforming, it's not a new thing. It's what is interesting about the book is it doesn't then go into a place where it's like, and so Harry was really a little girl, and we need to get Harry on some cross-sex hormones, on puberty blockers first, and then the cross-sex hormones, and let's start calling him a different name and different pronouns and pretending that he's a girl. They're not doing any of that. They're just saying Harry likes dolls. That's all. Harry likes dolls. As Billboard Chris likes to say, there's no right way to be a girl or a boy. We happen to be living through a very mad, a very crazy time in history where suddenly there are people saying if you are a gender nonconforming child, and a lot of these children are autistic, if you're gender nonconforming or autistic, we're going to have to do medical and surgical intervention. That might be something you want to do, little child. Let me talk to you, 4-year-old, about, maybe you might actually be the opposite sex. Children look to adults for truth. They look to adults for how to make sense of the world. You're not even giving children a chance to um, to conform to reality. I'm not talking about conforming to gender. I'm talking about conforming to reality. You're not even giving them a chance to conform to reality if, when they're that young, you're putting the idea in their head that they might not actually be the sex that they are. I have no problem with what used to happen, which was that a very, very small percentage of people, less than 1%, struggled with what was known as gender dysphoria, where they felt uncomfortable in their body and with their biological sex. Less than 1% of people this affected. When they reach adulthood, some of those people desist and come to be comfortable with the reality of their biological sex. A lot of them used to deal with in therapy other underlying issues that might be causing it. And now that's not the approach. Now, instead of it being a last resort, as an adult, a last resort to quote unquote transition and try to present as the opposite sex when you've tried everything else and nothing else is helping, instead of it being a last resort, now we're telling children, yeah, it's possible that you're born in the wrong body. No, it's not. This is your body. How could it be the wrong body? It's possible you might have extreme discomfort with it, but why tell children that? Why introduce that idea to them? If they're really one of those kids, less than 1% of people, they'll find that out. What you're doing is introducing the idea to the other 99.999% of children who never struggled with it, and you're telling them this is something as natural as figuring out if you wanna cut your hair short or not. Yeah, you might have long hair, you might have short hair. Yeah, you might be cis. They have a fake word for that now too, to make it seem like there's these 2 options you're supposed to figure out if you are. Or you might have short hair, you might have long hair, you might be cis, you might be trans. No. No. This is it is a time of madness. Yes, it's a very sinister normalization. That's why we shouldn't use the fake words like cis, because all that word does is try and normalize the idea that to kids, that's who the target is, and the way in which we adults also think about this, but especially to kids and future generations, they want those kids to grow up learning about this, and it's in some of the kids' books. This children's book I'm showing you guys is from 1894. There I was looking at some children's books today about teaching sexuality to kids, and they have these words in there like cis. They want the kids to grow up thinking, you might be tall, you might be short, you might decide to cut your hair short, you might decide to grow it long, you might decide that you're trans, or you might be cis. Like, they're trying to give what is normal a different name. So it seems like these options you're supposed to choose from, that this is just what everyone does. Everyone has to determine if they are, this thing or that thing. And that's not true. That's not how biological sex works. So, this relates to a news article that I saw Buck Angel share today. And if you're not following Buck Angel, I highly recommend following him. He is a trans man, so biological woman, who is often used to be called affectionately, Tranpa. Now he gets called a lot of hateful names by the gender cult, because there's no one they hate more than someone who actually is trans and they view as like one of us, who criticizes gender ideology and criticizes the mutilation, sterilization of children, who criticizes the propaganda that's being pushed on kids and the indoctrination. And that's what he does. And so, it doesn't matter what your view is on pronouns, or if you refuse to call him, him, he, or whatever, I don't care. And I don't think he does either. He's the first to admit that he has a mental illness, gender dysphoria, the first to admit that he's a biological woman. He's not asking anyone to, he's not one of those like trans men are men. He's not one of those people. So anyway, he shared this article and we're going to take a look at it because the US is really behind when it comes to figuring out how to protect children from this insidious ideology and the fact that the ideology has creeped into the medical establishment. So we're going to look at that. Before I do, let me just say thank you. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Robert Lowry is here. Thank you, Robert. $2. I'm here and slightly queer because I'm tardy. Oh, is that from the whole late and gay thing? I get it. I get it. Hello, Robert. House Scott, I said hello to you. Thank you for the super chat. Keto and Crime for $5. Hello, Tracy. Good to see you again. I saw you last night. Thank you for the support. She says, even Frankenfurter and Rocky Horror sang about being a man. Stop boxing people in. Yes, he's a man. And Vermont Cheddar is a new member here at YouTube. Thank you for the support, Vermont Cheddar, which is my favorite kind of cheddar. I like the Manchego. I like the Manchego cheese. Do you guys like that one? I don't know enough about cheeses to describe why, but maybe one day I'll learn more about them. But that one makes me happy. Okay. So this is Buck Angel. He says Finland takes another look at youth gender medicine. A recent interview with the country's top gender expert shows how out of step the American medical establishment is with its European counterparts. And then this is from Tablet Mag. Finland takes another look at youth gender medicine. And we're going to take a look at this article because I really think a lot of people who are in that woke world, that echo chamber, or as I have called it, a cult, they don't actually read articles like this. They're not aware of it. Some of them don't even know that Finland, Norway, Sweden, and the UK have all put a pause on, the so-called gender affirming care after a medical review of the evidence. Medical review. This is medical experts. They say they're the party of science and they're all about. So even if they know that Finland and Sweden and Norway and the UK have done this, they probably ask the people in your life, see what they know. Not in a mean way, just see what they know. Because I'm curious. I don't think most of them have heard of this. And if they have heard of it, they would probably just gut reaction say, oh, well, those are right-wing politicians. No, it's not politicians. It's the medical establishment after medical reviews. They're the ones that have put a pause on this. Okay. Here's the piece in Tablet Mag. I'll make this one just a little larger. Finland takes another look at youth gender medicine. A recent interview with the country's top gender expert shows how out of step the American medical establishment is with its European counterparts. Now, this is from February of this year. This is when it was first news that Finland was moving along the same way as Sweden. And then after this one, we got the news about Norway. But again, I don't think most people are aware of this. And the party of science, I don't think they know. The party of facts. Dr. Ridikertu Katilea knows gender medicine. She is the top expert on pediatric gender medicine in Finland and the chief psychiatrist at one of its 2 government-approved pediatric gender clinics at Tampere University, where she has presided over youth gender transition treatment since 2011. See, that's the other thing is all these whistleblowers, all these people who are now coming out and talking about it, they are coming from the field itself. That's also why they're hated. That's why they're smeared. Because the left hate the people who, like with me leaving woke, there's a special hatred for people who were in a field or considered one of us who then leave and say, no, this is crazy. I'm going to try and be a canary in a coal mine here. Like, what's happening here? I've been in it is crazy. And that's what this doctor is doing. Okay. Her research has even been cited, though not accurately, by American supporters of, quote, affirming care for gender dysphoric youth. She is one of the last people in the world who could be accused of being reactionary or transphobe or uninformed on the subject of trans healthcare. Earlier this month, however, just a few days before Finland passed a law granting its adult citizens the right to have their self-defined gender recognized in government documents, Dr. K gave an interview with Helsingin Sanomat, Finland's liberal newspaper of record. Her comments were a sobering reminder of just how out of step the American medical establishment is with its European counterparts when it comes to treating minors who reject their sex. The background to this interview is important. Finland was among the first countries to adopt the Dutch protocol for pediatric gender and medicine, which prescribes, in certain restricted cases, the use of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to treat adolescent gender dysphoria. By 2015, however, Finnish gender specialists, including Kaltiala were noticing that most of their patients did not match the profile of those treated in the Netherlands and did not meet the Dutch protocol's relatively strict eligibility requirements for drug treatments due to the extremely high rate at which children with gender issues come to terms with their bodies or desist by adulthood. See, let me just highlight this because that's what I was talking about a second ago. It used to be, until this became a social contagion, until it became um like a politicized ideology and a brainwashing that they're pushing, until it became mainstreamed like this in a kind of madness. What used to happen is that most people in that 0.1% of people who experienced gender dysphoria, most of them with therapy over time would desist, meaning they would come to accept the reality and be comfortable with the reality of their biological sex. That's what would happen. But then they changed, the entire medical approach changed, and the doctors and the psychiatrists who had been treating gender dysphoric people for decades and doing so successfully, they were suddenly demonized because they weren't pushing hormones and surgery on everyone. They were like, let's do therapy first and see what might be happening. Right? But this is true. Due to the extremely high rate at which children with gender issues come to terms with their bodies or desist by adulthood, most of them used to. The Dutch protocol requires patients to have gender dysphoria that begins before puberty and intensifies in adolescence. It also requires them to have no serious co-occurring mental health problems. This is huge in order to undergo at least 6 months of psychotherapy and to have the support of their family for hormonal treatments. This one is huge. If we did this in the US, most of these kids, if we had these regulations, most of these kids that are currently being transitioned and then later a lot of them as young adults trying to detransition after having lost, in some cases, their breasts, their body parts, after having been put on, in some cases, cross-sex hormones that have sterilized them, these kids who are trying to detransition. If we had had this strict, you know, if we had had this strict of a process to be able to receive medical and surgical intervention, then maybe some of that wouldn't have happened to some of those kids who are now detransitioning. A lot of them have co-occurring mental health problems. And now if you look at some of the detransitioners who are speaking out, and there's more and more of them coming forward every day, there's a lot of them on Twitter now, and there's a lot on YouTube now. Go and listen to some of their stories. A lot of them are saying things like, "Yeah, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and my therapist and my psychiatrist knew that, and they still recommended transition." What? If you have a previous diagnosis of a personality disorder, like, that's what you need to address. If you have anxiety, depression, any of these other issues, any other co-occurring mental health problem, deal with that before you put these kids on hormone blockers, cross-sex hormones, and then cut off their body parts. Sorry for the rant, but yeah. Anyway, so the Dutch protocol required that that they have no serious co-occurring mental health problems. Within a few years of their country adopting the Dutch protocol in 2011, however, Finnish researchers noticed a sharp rise in the number of patients referred for services. Most of these patients were teenage girls. Yes, it's mostly teenage girls that are experiencing this as a social contagion right now. Just like in the 90s, it was mostly teenage girls as a social contagion once cutting became a thing and spread like wildfire. Even eating disorders, once they started being including in a lot of media, a lot of popular culture, and spread like wildfire. And that's what's happening here among teenage girls. So most of these patients were teenage girls with no history of dysphoria in childhood. And some, 68%, had a history of severe psychopathology prior to the emergence of their gender-related distress. Yes. During the same time period, the UK's largest pediatric gender clinic at the Tavistock Centre witnessed a 3,360% surge in patient referrals between 2009 and 2018. That's insane. You know what they should have been doing studies on? You know what the science requires? What the science requires, a scientific mind would go, what the crap is happening? In 9 years, a 3,360% increase in the number of kids who are saying, oh yeah, me too. I'm also trans. What's going on here? That's what science would ask. Most of the new patients were females whose representation in the clinic rose 4,400% during this time frame. Again, that's a 9-year time frame, with a history of serious psychological problems and no gender dysphoria prior to adolescence. Similar trends were being observed in other countries with pediatric gender clinics, including the United States. In 2018, the American physician researcher Lisa Lippman published a study suggesting that teenage girls with high rates of mental health problems were suddenly declaring a transgender identity, often in friend groups and after prolonged exposure to social media. A year later, Kautiala and her Finnish colleagues observed in a peer-reviewed article that research on adolescent-onset gender dysphoria is scarce and optimal treatment options have not been established. The reasons for the sudden increase in treatment seeking due to adolescent-onset gender dysphoria and transgender identification are not known. This lack of research and lingering doubts about the Dutch protocol itself, the only attempt to replicate it in the UK had failed, led health authorities in Finland, Sweden, and the UK to conduct systemic reviews of evidence for the benefits and risks of hormonal interventions. Okay, we're about to get into this part. It gets really interesting. Let me just check on you guys in the chat. Is everyone being okay in here? Okay. Okay, good. Hello. Okay, let's return. Again, we're reading this Tablet Mag article. Finland takes another look at youth gender medicine. This is the kind of thing I really suggest sharing with people in your life who are on the left. If they're super like hardcore woke ideologues, it's not going to matter to them. They're just the type who'll try and use the weasel words of that ideology, of my old ideology, to ignore this, or they'll deflect or what have you, if they're super in it. But I think generally, if you're good with people, you can tell which people still have a little bit of openness to their mind and still might be on the fence about certain things. And, there are people in your life probably you can think of who they would be a good type of person to send this to, just to say like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm reading this. What do you think? It doesn't mean you're always going to get a positive response, but why not try? Or this is the kind to share online. Maybe you don't have to target a specific person, put them on the hot seat. You could just share this article. Systematic reviews represent the highest level of evidence analysis in evidence-based medicine. The 3 European countries that did these reviews independently they did different systematic reviews, and they all three came to the same conclusion. Due to their severe methodological limitations, studies cited in support of hormonal interventions for adolescents are of, quote, very low certainty. For health authorities in these countries, this meant that the studies were too unreliable to justify the risks and the uncertainties of gender-affirming care. Yeah, it is. I was thinking about this today. I don't know if you have seen any of these photos online. Um, it's hard to share them because some sites will block them immediately, for sharing um, naked photos, which maybe they should do. But isn't it odd that you can't that we can be doing this to kids, but then we they find it too extreme to allow the photos to be shown, right? So I don't know if you've seen any of these photos, but they're out there. You can find them. I've seen photos of um, the so-called gender affirming care they're doing to people where they remove the double mastectomy. They remove both breasts. In some cases, for the young girls, that the teenage girls that are saying that they're non-binary, they're doing this new surgery where they also remove the nipple, okay, to make them look like aliens, so that they have just these two scars with no nipples at all. They don't look like women or men. Um, they're disfiguring minors in that way, teenage girls. I have also seen the the pictures of what they do. If you haven't seen these, I know some of you have. What they're doing for some of the girls who say that they're boys is when they try and create a fake penis, it looks very like Frankenstein. If you're imagining that they've like progressed to this point where they're able to like put on something that looks real, no, they're taking skin from their girls' arms. So you'll see all these photos of scars where they have just all of the skin removed here surgically. And they have this terrible scar on their arm. And they take that skin and they wrap it around tissue and they stitch it on like Frankenstein. And then they have this weird, grotesque um, skin tube thing that looks about as terrible as you could imagine. Dystopian and just horrific. Now, if you're an adult and you're choosing to do that to yourself, it doesn't matter what I think about it. I don't care. I know there are some people who would argue that the medical establishment shouldn't be doing that even for adults because it's so grotesque. Like if an adult came in and said, "I identify as only having one leg, will you take my leg off?" Should a doctor do that? Should a doctor do an amputation so you can identify as, someone who's handicapped? I have to think about that more. I have to think about that more. But in general, with adults, I'm kind of like, whatever you want to do, dude, to yourself. You're an adult, as long as it's not hurting anyone else. But for kids to do these surgeries on them, the risk involved, that's what this sentence is here about. To justify the risks and uncertainties of so-called gender affirming care. Just one. All it takes is one. The people who are pushing this stuff, they're like, "Oh, there's not that many first they say there's no detransitioners, which is a lie. They lie. When you show them evidence of, "Hey, there's a lot of detransitioners," they're like, "Oh, it's just a few." It's not a few. It's not a few. It remains because this is currently happening. It remains to be seen how many are going to come forward and try to detransition, but it's every day I see more of them. Anecdotally speaking, if you go online, every day I see more. But according to the way the left argues, it doesn't even need to be a lot because they're the ones who like to say, if it saves just one life, right? If it saves just one life. Hey, guess what? If it saves just one life, to tell the medical establishment that children have to be adults first, that they have to wait until these kids are adults and can consent. If it saves just one kid, then that's what we need to be doing. Children can't consent to this horrible mutilation, this disfigurement, this sterilization in many cases. The brains aren't developed enough to even comprehend what choice they're making. This is also why we don't allow children to have sex with adults. They're not old enough to comprehend what they're doing. Even if they say, "It's my choice, it's my choice." This is why Mary Kay Letourneau went to prison. Remember that teacher in the 90s who was having sex with her 12-year-old student? And he kept saying, it's my choice. Even when she got out of prison, he married her. It doesn't matter. What she did to him was wrong. I've since heard that kid, who's now in his 30s, is finally saying, yeah, what happened to me wasn't right. Yeah, maybe. She was your second grade teacher, so she met you when you were what, like 7, started a sexual relationship with you when you were 12. It's wrong. And even if the kid says, I love her, I'm in it, I'm old enough to make this decision. No, you're not. You're 12 years old. And it's the same thing with this. It's the same thing. Kids are not old enough to make these decisions. I've seen a meme recently going around that says, you better start thinking of your excuses for why you supported the sterilization of kids. And it's a great meme because I remain optimistic that we are going to follow the lead of Finland, Norway, Sweden, the UK, and we're going to ban it here. We're going to say, I can't believe the bill should be called, I can't believe we had to make a separate bill for this because it should already be illegal under existing child abuse laws. That's what the bill should be called. But here it is. You can't do this to kids. I'm optimistic that we're going to follow their lead. We're going to do the same thing. When that happens, history is not going to look kindly on these people who supported experimenting on children, medically, surgically altering them, taking their reproductive organs, mutilating them, sterilizing them. History is not going to look kindly on you. Okay. I'll continue. Oh, thank you, Frying Pants. Frying Pants became a new YouTube member here at Deprogrammed. Thank you and welcome. I like your screen name. Frying Pants. Yes, AH says, how about I thought this was already a legal bill. Yeah. That's what I want to do. I want to make a meme. That's what we should call it. I can't believe I have to keep thinking about it. Kind of like, I can't believe this isn't butter. I can't believe this is not butter. I thought this was already illegal, the bill. Okay. Okay, so they're saying, to return to this piece, that in these countries that did the systematic review, so Finland, Sweden, and UK, they had their own independent medical reviews of all the available information, and they found that the so-called benefits of doing gender-affirming care on kids was too unreliable, not enough to justify the risks and uncertainties of the so-called gender-affirming care. Sweden, Finland, and England have since placed severe restrictions on access to hormones. Although these countries now allow hormones in a very carefully selected cohort of patients who fulfill the criteria of the Dutch protocol, they do so against the findings of their own systematic reviews. So they still have like a little loophole for a very small number of people who fit the Dutch protocol, a number of kids, but that's even against the recommendation of their own medical boards and the findings of these reviews. That's because the systematic review found the Dutch study on which the Dutch protocol is based also provides very low certainty evidence. Finland's Council for Choices in Healthcare recognizes medical transition for minors as a, quote, experimental practice, end quote. Kaltiala was a major force behind the decision to reverse course in Finland. More recently, she testified before the Florida medical boards in support of their decision to restrict access to puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for minors. Asked by the Helsingin Sanomat what she thought of gender self-identification for minors, a proposed element of the new Finnish law that did not ultimately pass, she emphasized that it is, quote, important to accept children as they are, end quote. But this means neither pressuring a child to conform to behaviors traditionally associated with the child's sex, nor, quote, negating the body by confirming that the child's gender self-identification is real. Do you hear that last part? That's really important, lefties. Accepting a child, they're the ones who are like, we accept children as they are. Really? Then why do you need to cut off their breasts? Let a kid be a kid. Accept them as they are. Evidence from a combined 12 studies to date demonstrates that when children with cross-gender or gender variant behavior are left to develop naturally, the vast majority, 4 out of 5 according to Kaltia, come to terms with their bodies and learn to accept their sex. When they are socially transitioned, virtually none do. This makes sense. Think of psychology. If everyone around you, if you're a little kid who's 4 years old, you're a boy that likes to play with dolls, you say one day, I would like to be a unicorn. Your parents don't think anything of it. A couple weeks later, you say you would like to be a girl. And then, no, they make a lot out of that. And he likes to play with dolls. Oh, my goodness. And he said he wants to be a girl. If they start socially transitioning you, think about what happens. Everyone in your life as a kid, from your family to your social group, once you're old enough to get on social media, your school, your doctors they're taking you to, they're all telling you, yeah, you were born in the wrong body. Yeah, you're not really a boy, you're a girl. They all change your name. You make your whole identity around being born in the wrong body, about actually being a girl. Now think about what is the likelihood that you will desist from this mental illness and this gender dysphoria? What's the likelihood in that scenario? Instead of it being 4 out of 5 who desist, it's 0 out of 5. And that makes sense because of all the psychological impediments you've now put up to desisting. How can they let everyone around them down? Everyone who bought into, when they were 4 years old, them saying they were really a girl. And they've built their whole identity on it. So what's the likelihood they're going to desist? So what this means is that instead of 4 out of 5 kids desisting and not needing to do medical and surgical intervention, you've now got 5 out of 5 kids who are pursuing medical and surgical intervention. This is what the whistleblowers in gender affirming care here in the States are saying too. They're saying, one of them said, who's queer and married to a trans man. She's married to a trans person. She came out, whistleblower, super lefty. She's like, something's wrong here. She's like, all of the kids, all of them are moving along to the medical and surgical transition, all of them. She's like, that's not scientific. That's not what you would see. That means there's something weird going on here. It's a social contagion. And then they reach the point where when they finally, the brave ones who start desisting, some of those 4 out of 5 who would have desisted otherwise, once they start, that's why you're seeing them now, a few of them, some of them in early adulthood. It takes them a while after they've already lost parts of their bodies. Because our society, our laws, our medical establishment, their parents, the adults in the room, the adults in their life didn't protect them from themselves, didn't protect them when they were kids. If you're a parent who believes that it's your responsibility to protect your child, your teenager, your preteen from having sex with an adult, even if they say they want to, like, why don't you think it's also your job to protect them from surgically modifying their body, even if they say they want to, until they're an adult? I don't get it. We protect children for a reason. That most children desist from cross-sex identification does not necessarily mean that they will no longer experience any distress associated with their bodies. Rather, it means that even if such distress lingers, it will not prevent them from becoming reasonably well-adjusted and living a good life. The notion that no human should ever have to experience any discomfort associated with male or female embodiment, including during the turbulent period of puberty, is the utopian promise fueling much of the gender transition industry. There's been a growing movement among gender activists to frame puberty as something that the autonomous disembodied self should have a right to choose. I've noticed that too, where they're like, shouldn't have to go through puberty. What's life? That's life. We shouldn't have to die either, but that's life. That's what happens. It's like this is why my pastor at the church on the square, Bradley Helgerson, he's called this a war on reality. This woke thing, the war that we currently happen to be engaged in, I guess you could say we're lucky enough to have been born into this time period in this place. or maybe unlucky in some ways. But what we're currently battling, it's a culture war, yes. I think it's also a spiritual war, and I think, like my pastor says, it's a war in reality. And you see that in stuff like this, where they're like, we shouldn't have to go through puberty. Neither puberty suppression nor allowing puberty to occur is a neutral act, writes the World Professional Association for Transgender Health in the 7th version of its standards of care. Unlike progressive elites in the United States who seem to regard social affirmation of, quote, transgender children as little more than an act of kindness, this doctor sees it as a powerful intervention into a young person's psychosocial development. Yes, it is. That's what we were just talking about. It is. Your kid is now a guinea pig. Once you start affirming their pronouns, it's too late. They're a science experiment now. Once you start calling your little boy she and her, once you start putting your little boy in girl clothes, you've picked what that path is for your kid. Because they're a science experiment now. Now it's a psychological experiment where everyone around them is telling them, yeah, you're a girl, not even giving them a chance to grow out of it. I'm going to stop reading this now because I'm just going to keep ranting about it. But this piece is excellent. I shared it on my Twitter at Real Keri Smith. This is the piece that Buck Angel had shared. I also shared it on my Facebook. I'm going to put it here in the chat as well. I don't know if you can click on it from the chat, but there it is. It's a great piece. Go and check it out and read the rest of it there. It's a great piece. And share it, like I said. It's the kind of piece I think it's all about the science. It's all about the facts. This is a good one to share with people on the left, whether you do it on social media or people in your life, just to see what they think. They are the party of science. Okay. I've got a couple of other things that I saw related to this subject, so I'll transition into this next one. So, given what we're just reading there about Finland, Sweden, the UK, and Norway, and how they've decided to put a halt on so-called gender-affirming care for minors after this systematic review of the medical evidence, you will notice that here in the US, we're still backwards. So there have been some states, my state, I'm proud to say, is one of those states, Texas, which is trying to pass a bill that we said we should call, I can't believe this is not already a legal bill. We're trying to do a bill here that says, yeah, you can't cut up kids. You can't put them on hormones that might sterilize them. They need to be adults to decide if they want to do those things or not, right? So take a look at what I saw this morning. Here we go. The ACLU, who I mentioned before, I have been a top fan on their page before on Facebook, and looks like I'm going to become a top fan again. I used to be a card-carrying member of the ACLU. The ACLU, it doesn't really stand for what the letters used to stand for. So if you're a young person, the ACLU, it used to stand for, those letters stood for the American Civil Liberties Union, but it's kind of like MTV. MTV, if you don't know and you're a young person, used to mean music television because they showed music videos there. So now it doesn't mean music television anymore. They even got rid of it used to say that those words under the acronym. They got rid of that because now they don't show music videos and they do a lot of reality. It's not about music at all. But if you don't know where those letters came from, that's the history, the etymology of MTV. And the same is with ACLU. ACLU used to mean the American Civil Liberties Union. It has separated itself from that meaning entirely. They no longer care about civil liberties. And there was an internal coup that happened in 2018. I don't know how many people remember this, but I remember this. I had just started coming out of the woke cult in 2016, and it was a process of about a year. It took me quite a bit to fully, I mean, even now I'm shedding some ideas from that world. But in 2018, it was pretty fresh, and I was aghast when I saw what the ACLU was pushing around that time. They became very woke. And if you're woke, you don't care about civil liberties, which is how they started off. So the ACLU, for young people, they used to support, this is crazy, you won't believe this, but they supported civil liberties at all costs. Free speech, the rights of the individual over the rights of the state. They supported the little guy because they believed in the principles of civil liberties. They believed in the principles of free speech. And even if they hated what you used your speech for and they hated you, they would defend you because they understood that free speech was important. And if you start eroding it for one gross person, you erode it for everyone. And so they would defend the rights of white supremacists like the KKK to say what they wanted. That's what they used to do. Now they've become woke. And in 2018, there were some leaked internal memos from the ACLU, which we can put up here in a second if we have time, just a little take you back a few years, which showed that they had an internal struggle like a lot of organizations were doing at that time. Woke had invaded, woke ideology, my old ideology had invaded, like it does. It invades companies, it invades organizations, it invades political parties, hobby groups like knitting, which we know, gaming. It's once it gets in there like a virus, if you get enough people speaking it, it takes over and it corrupts the entire purpose, original purpose of that company, that organization, that hobby group, that church. And then it like a virus, like a zombie, it animates it and starts using it to push woke instead. That's what happened to the ACLU. It's like a zombie right now. The name still exists, the acronym still exists, but this is the dead corpse of the ACLU, and they're walking around using it for woke. After that internal coup that happened in 2018, all the civil liberty lovers left. They were either ousted or left, and the woke took over. So here you can see a tweet that they did yesterday where they say, breaking. This is on the ACLU's Twitter. Breaking. We're suing Texas over their ban on gender affirming care for transgender youth. Couple things about this. Think about that article we just read about Finland. This is the exact opposite approach. They're not doing this based on science. They're not doing this based on medicine. They're not doing this based on what's in the best interest of the kid. And they're certainly not doing this based on civil liberties, because these are children they're talking about. They're not talking about adults. They're talking about children. If they actually cared about civil liberties, they would be representing, if the ACLU actually cared about civil liberties, they would be representing any number of the detransitioners who have come forward and are trying to sue the medical establishment, the big gender cult medical industrial complex. They would be fighting the medical industrial complex. They would be representing the individuals and the kids who got taken advantage of by the system. They're not representing these detransitioners. Why? Because they are no longer about civil liberties. They're about pushing the woke agenda at all costs. And all I have to say to them being here in Texas is good luck trying to justify sterilizing and mutilating children in the Texas courts. Good luck. If you want to do that stuff in another state, I'm not happy about it. I think it should be illegal there too. But at least it's not my state. We don't do that in Texas. We're not cool with it here, and we're never going to be cool with it here. It's never going to be legal here. I fully believe that. It's never going to be legal here again. You're not going to be able to abuse your kids, to cut them up. You're not going to be able to sterilize them in Texas. So waste your money, get all your money from your Hollywood celebrities to spend here in Texas on this lawsuit, and prepare for a good ass whooping. That's what I have to say about that. I'm here for this fight. I'm here for bring it to Texas. Fine. Okay. I'll take that off the screen. I'm just going to show you, since I mentioned it, for the people who were not aware. Here's an article from Reason magazine. This is from 2018. And this is about that that big internal coup that happened at the ACLU. The headline here, leaked internal memo reveals the ACLU is wavering on free speech. Quote, our defense of speech may have a greater or lesser harmful impact on the equality and justice work to which we are also committed. Oh, yeah. You know why? Because the defense of free speech and your equality and justice work are opposed to one another. So you got to pick one. Do you defend free speech or do you pursue equity or social justice? Those are opposed to one another. They ended up picking social justice. But you can read all about this memo here that was leaked about their internal fightings and how they were trying to figure out. Oh, look here. This is where marginalized people. Where's that quote? I should just read this. It's so gross. It's hard to see this as anything other than a cowardly retreat from a full-throated defense of the First Amendment. Moving forward, when deciding whether to take a free speech case, the ACLU will consider, quote, factors such as the present and historical context of the proposed speech and the potential effect on marginalized communities, the extent to which the speech may assist in advancing the goals of white supremacists or others whose views are contrary to our values, and the structural and power inequalities in the community in which the speech will occur. This is a whole lot of mumbo jumbo to say, hey, we're all into social justice now. We don't care about defending free speech anymore. That's what that means. That's what happened with the ACLU. I'm going to drop the link to this old article too. This is like I said, a Reason article from 2018. There's other pieces out there you can find, but I think this is the best one about what happened to them. Here. How much time do we have? Because I've got a couple more things to show you guys. How are you guys doing in the chat? Thanks for hanging out today. I hope you're having a happy Friday and you're gonna have a happy weekend. If you're in the Texas area, I should have mentioned at the top. Hey, Davina. I should have mentioned at the top. My husband is playing and his full band. They're playing tomorrow at the historic Lukenbach stage. And if you are anywhere in the area, especially if you're new to Texas, I know some cultural refugees who are new here. And if you're even within an hour or two of Lukenbach and you've never been, you should come. Come say hello. I'll be there. Tiger will be there. And you may know Lukenbach if you're new here and you haven't been there yet. You may know it from the really famous Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson song, Lukenbach, Texas, which is that's what it's about. It's about this little stage. Lukenbach is this tiny little, it's not even a town. It's what do you call it? Where it's I'm blanking on the word, but there's like only 3 people who live there. There's a word for it. It's part of like another town. It's sandwiched right in between. It's like at Hye, Texas, and Johnson City and Fredericksburg are all around. And yeah. You know the song, Therese. She says with Waylon and Willie and the boys. Yeah. Back in Lukenbach, Texas. Yeah, Rib. Frying Pants says, I'm wearing my Lukenbach t-shirt right now. How cool is that? I never thought I'd hear this. Keri Smith says, get bent, ACLU. Well, yeah, get bent is a great phrase. A hamlet or a parish, people are saying. Maybe that's what it's like, but this is the word I was looking for. Yes, Nomo. They say it's unincorporated, but maybe it's like a hamlet. Anyway, tomorrow, Lukenbach, historic Lukenbach. If you're in the area, I'll see you there. And it's gonna be a good weekend. So I've got something fun we can end on that just cracked me up. Maybe I shouldn't have told you it cracked me up because it might have been a surprise for you, but oh well. This is so good. Okay, you know we're living in a time, right, where it's getting harder and harder to do satire and sarcasm. And I think this probably has happened throughout history when you go through a time that's very upside down, that's very mad, very crazy, very Orwellian, where up is down is up. History kind of goes through these cycles, right? We're in one of those times right now where up is down is up, where mutilating and sterilizing kids, we're being told that's somehow affirming for children. Like everything is the opposite right now. So when you live through a time like that, I truly believe it's harder to do satire and sarcasm because you'll do sarcasm, you'll do satire, and people think it's real because it's not so far off from what people are actually saying in seriousness. So you have to get really creative. And then the people who do satire and sarcasm well in a time like this, I mean, they're very talented people. And so this ad, I think, took a lot of talent. And here, let's just watch it. Let's just put it on the screen. So this ad was posted with the message, the Supreme Court has forever changed our sex lives. We're living through a very dark time. Here we go.
It's been one whole year since Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Which means they've been making abortion illegal all over the place.
So these are dark times.
These are dark times.
Dark times.
Dark times.
Un tiempo muy oscuro. Because now that Roe v. Wade is...
Wait, I just have to pause for a second. They did this so well that it fooled both me and my husband at first. It's like, I'm like, I thought this was a real leftist ad. They even got the emotional Spanish lady in there to speak, the emotional Latinx to speak Spanish like they do in these white ads. You know what I mean? Anyway. yeah, the Latinx. Okay. Sorry, I talked over it. Let's rewind just a little bit. These are dark times.
Dark times.
Dark times.
Un tiempo muy oscuro. Because now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, a woman can get pregnant just from having sex.
I'm now seriously considering going down the dangerous path of abstinence until marriage.
I find myself in this really bizarre state where I'm asking guys about things like their values and trustworthiness before sleeping with them.
Before a girl will have sex with me now, she's asking me all these dumb questions like, do you love me? And what happens if I get pregnant? And do you have a job? Like, I don't know.
Abortion being illegal where I live has definitely raised the bar for which men I'll date and have sex with. And that's a terrible thing.
It used to be that if I got a girl pregnant, I would just force her to get an abortion. And I can't do that anymore.
What?
And that's awful.
I can't tell you how many first dates I've had in the last year where no sex happens. All we do is talk about who we are and get to know each other.
Ladies, if you haven't done it already, you need to get an IUD. This will make your uterus a toxic and hostile environment like it's supposed to be.
It's like now sex is such a bigger deal. It's not just about me using someone else's body to get myself off.
It's like the government is making me responsible for a bunch of stuff I shouldn't be responsible for, like my sex life and my children.
Why would I ever want to bring a child into a world like this? A world in which it's illegal to kill children.
I live in constant fear of a baby somehow finding its way into my uterus.
Somehow.
So these are dark times.
Dark times.
Dark times.
The overturning of Roe v. Wade did this to me. The Supreme Court of the United States put this inside of my body.
Amy
Okay,
Coney
so
Barrett.
new idea here. I
directly.
think that a man and a woman, before they have sex, need to draw up some sort of contract that says, I promise to take care of you and you promise to take care of me. And we both promise to take care of any kids that we produce together. I mean, like, I know it's new. I know it's shocking. I know it's out there, but that kind of contract is the only way that I see us moving forward.
That's marriage.
No,
No.
it's not. Well,
Wait.
Amy Coney Barrett personally
Coney
did this
Barrett
to me.
personally did this to me. Oh man. Okay, so this is I just want to credit the people who made this because it's so well done. And it turns out it's a pro-life organization called Live Action. Here, I'll put their Twitter on the screen. Now, it doesn't matter if you're pro-choice or pro-life, this is funny. As some of you know, my views on abortion have been in flux the past few years, and I'm a person who thinks it should. Oh, wait, sorry, I just got rid of the thing I was trying to put on the screen. I'm a person who thinks it. I have trouble with the concept of the. I have trouble with the concept of the government being able to tell a person what they can do with their body. And yes, I know there's another body inside of them. It's the only case I can think of, the only instance I can think of where two bodies are residing in one. And my views have been in flux. I am open to and hear all the time contrary views. They used to be different. I used to be, when I was woke, I was one of those, abortion up until the point of birth, Now I'm at the place where I feel like if the baby can survive outside the womb, then it should be illegal. And science keeps pushing that date back earlier. And I'm okay with states like Texas that have tried to do a compromise of bills of like, okay, we're going to allow it, but just for this short amount of time. And after that, no more excuses. If you want abortion, do it during this time period, unless there's some extenuating circumstance like the life of the mother. Otherwise, the further along in development you're getting, the less easy it is, I think, to justify killing that baby. Now I know there are pro-lifers. I'm pretty familiar with most of the arguments against what I'm saying, and feel free to argue with me on it because I'm open to it. I'm still thinking about it. And anyway, the whole point being, even someone like me can laugh at this, even though this is a thoroughly pro-life ad. It's funny. And yes, as Adam said in the chat, this is what SNL should be doing. This is comedy show level parody and satire. It was really well done. Good job. The fact that a nonprofit did it, a political nonprofit at live action, that's amazing. Like, some of the political candidates, DeSantis, everybody's criticizing him lately for his ads. I don't know. But if you think his ads have been bad, maybe you should hire the people who did the live action ad. Like, whoever's doing their ads lately, their viral videos, it's really good work. So brilliant, funny, kudos. I laughed a lot, and it had a message while making comedy the first thing, which I liked. So that's them on Twitter, live action. I think they have others up. I haven't had time to watch all of them, but that one was so good. Okay. I think that I'll wrap it up now. I know it's only been an hour and a half, but unless you guys have other things you want to talk about, that was most of what I had on the list today, the things I had seen in the news. Let me just make double sure. Oh, there was that guy. I don't know if I want to talk about that. There's this comedian on Twitter. His name's Andy Kendler, and he's it's unfortunate because he's kind of like, if you want to see somebody who's melting down in real life, his Twitter feed, that's all you got to read. And how woke, I think it's also a really good example of how woke is like a brain virus, and how it can make you mentally unwell and unhappy, spiritually unwell, and hateful and angry and paranoid. And there's a lot of celebrities like that on Twitter, unfortunately, in the past few years, who we can look to and say, like, this is pretty creepy. John Cusack, Deborah Messing, Keith Olbermann. I would put this guy, Andy Kindler, in the same group. He's having what could be described as a like a manic sort of episode on Twitter that he's been having for days, where he's just calling everyone transphobes, and he's screenshotting different accounts and calling them TERFs, and telling his audience to block this TERF, block this bigot, block this person, block this comedian. He's screenshotting different people, and he's talking about how Twitter's become too hateful and toxic, but he doesn't seem to understand his whole feed is hateful and toxic. It's just nothing but name calling. When they're that mad, when they've reached that level of it, it's like, you can look at them from the outside and say, how can they not see it? But they can't. They really can't. They can't see the projection. They see hatefulness and toxicity everywhere because it's exuding from them. And he's like that. And anyway, I think he he got caught responding to himself. Apparently, that's what it looked like. He tweeted something and then he himself said, "That's right, Andy," and and started agreeing with himself. And people were like, "Hey," some other accounts were like, "Hey, did you log into a separate account or forget to log into a separate account? Like, do you have sock puppet accounts that you usually use and you forgot to log into it because you're talking to yourself?" And so now he's saying, "You idiots, I've always done that. That's a part of my comedy on Twitter." And he's pinned something up there about me, about how I guess I'm a TERF and a bigot and I'm too dumb to know that that's a bit that he does. And okay, maybe it is a bit that you do. If it is, it's pretty funny. But to someone who doesn't follow you all the time, how would they know that it did legitimately look like you were talking to yourself and that you had forgotten to sign into your alt? And so I'm not convinced one way or the other. I kind of think maybe you did forget to sign into your alt. I don't know. Anyway, the point, Andy Kindler, if you happen to be watching, which I know you probably won't, because he also blocks everyone and he limits replies. He does that thing like they do in the cult where they can't stand hearing anyone with a differing opinion. So I doubt he would ever watch this, but I will say I was sincere when I said, I hope you make it out of woke. It is possible. I made it out of woke. I think a lot of your problems and a lot of the hatred and toxicity you see when you look out into the world would go away if you got out of that ideology. And I think you would be a lot happier and have a lot more joy in your life and less of the misery that you're exhibiting. You must have so much of it that you can't contain it. You can't keep it off of your social media now even. So I was sincere. I feel bad for you. I feel bad for people who are in it, who it's like a sickness. It's a madness. We live in a mad world and it's making people mad. And I sincerely hope you get out of that cult, Andy Kindler. So that's it. Thank you for the super chats. Tyler Turducken, $5. Thank you for supporting Deprogrammed. Says there's women's history, Black history, Hispanic heritage, and Pride months. Pride has more power and influence than all the others combined. Why? That's a great question, Tyler. I think it's for probably more than one reason. Excuse me. One is just the order of things. It seems to be like the trans thing is sort of the newer thing. And so it's like putting a new product out that hasn't been on the market, but they're like, we've got this new version you haven't seen before of woke. And so among all the different identity groups, trans is just more novel. So it's getting more attention. That's part of the reason. But I think also underneath maybe more nefarious reasons. And this isn't why a lot of the well-intentioned people who are in woke are pushing it. They're not aware of this, but I think on some deeper level, maybe like a spiritual level, this part is getting so much more attention because it relates to the parts of the ideology that are really just about absolute destruction of a generation. Absolute destruction of a generation. Because this part of the ideology, the gender cult stuff, as it relates to kids, is all about either sterilizing kids, mutilating kids, or psychologically messing with them to such a degree. Like the little kids that are growing up with this crap in their schools and from their parents and their peer groups, like think of all the problems we have as Gen X and the kind of stuff we had to deal with in childhood. Not to make light of it, I'm just saying all those things we had to deal with still exist. Okay. So if you were in a bad situation as a kid, those things still exist, whatever that bad situation was. And on top of it, you're living in a mad, crazy world like this. I don't even know like how those young generations, say a prayer for them because they're growing up with this just insane ideology around them. So thank you, Jason M. It's good to see you again. Thanks for supporting the channel. 5 Canadian buckaroos says, Keri, in your experience, how would you compare pathologies from the far left and those from the far right? Well, I don't know as much about the ones on the far right. I have interviewed people. I've interviewed, if you're curious and you're new to the channel, one of the most interesting interviews I think I've done was with Jack Buckby. So you can find that here on Deprogrammed. He left the alt-right. And so that interview is actually, it's me having left the alt-left, the far left, and him having left the far right, the alt-right, talking together about the differences and similarities. It was a little over a year ago that I did that one, so I'd have to go back and look at it. But from what I remember about it, some of the most interesting stuff is that, here's some of the differences. The far left ideology, the woke left, the alt left, the social justice left, whatever you want to call it, there's always new names for it. But this predominant ideology, it's different from the far right in that at this moment in time, it's culturally dominant. Okay. The far right, white supremacy, all that stuff, the stuff Jack was mixed up in when he was young, that stuff is on the fringe. Now, I think in the past couple years, it's been growing a little bit in response to the far left, because for every, that Newton's third law, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so they're creating the boogeyman they keep saying exists. But in general, no, the far right is still fringe, especially compared to the far left. The far left, this woke, authoritarian, illiberal, racist ideology known as woke, known as social justice, it has infiltrated every domain of mainstream society. It's infiltrated politics, entertainment, the media, the press. It's infiltrated education, or like for little kids, it's infiltrated churches, hobby groups, everything. It is considered the dominant religion currently, although they don't say it's a religion, but it is. It's everywhere. It's mainstream. So that's one way in which they're different, because everybody disavows the extreme right, the far right, everybody except for those fringe people, those few people. But you don't have any major conservative party. You don't have any press or any, you don't have any mainstream anything that's like, yeah, white supremacy. Like nobody's doing that, but they're all doing like, yeah, woke, and they're equally evil. They're equally racist. So isn't that kind of crazy? When people sometimes will say like, oh, Keri, you follow this person on the right. Did you know? Well, first of all, I follow a lot of people. I don't know what they all believe. I'll click on something if I see something interesting, and I don't spend a lot of time looking at everything else previously they've said. If I follow them, because I just want a diverse feed. So, but sometimes I'll go like, oh, Keri, you follow this crazy right-wing person. Did you know? And I was like, no, and I don't care, because you know what? I follow a lot of crazy left-wing people. It's just that you guys call them mainstream. they're fucking crazy. Sorry for my language. They're freaking crazy. Like they're racist. They're just as evil as the white supremacists, the woke. They are. The ideology is. I mean, there's a lot of good intentioned people in there, but the ideology just as evil. But it's mainstream, so that's one big difference. The other big difference is, if you leave, this is something Jack Buckby talked about in the interview. If you leave woke like I did, you're going to be treated as an apostate for sure. They're going to hate it, like, because you were one of theirs, and it's, now you're a turncoat and all this, and you're going to be attacked and all of that. But if you leave woke, you will at least find open-minded, welcoming people in the center, in the conservative side, on the conservative side, the libertarians, the other classical liberals who've left. There's a whole growing community of us who've left the woke left. And some of those people are liberal, some are conservative, some are centrist. There's a whole bunch of welcoming people. If you leave woke, you can find wrong thinkers, right, who like you. If you leave the alt-right, here's one difference. Jack Buckby was saying it is really hard to find a welcoming space, because the conservatives don't want to have anything to do with you, because you used to be a part of the far right, and that's what they get called all the time. They get called the extreme right, so they don't want to associate with you if you've left. And he said, this is interesting. He said the left will not have anything to do with you unless you become woke. So it's not enough to leave white supremacy or leave the alt-right and just become like you can't just the woke will not lift you up unless you become one of them. That's what he was saying. And so there's a disincentive in some cases, more of a disincentive to leave, I think, the extreme right than to leave the extreme left, because the extreme right, a lot of those guys, he was saying, if they end up questioning their evil belief system, if they end up questioning white supremacy and having doubts about it, the way I started questioning social justice and having doubts about it, a lot of times they look at their options and some of them end up self-deleting because they don't see any way out of it. And so what Jack Buckby and anti-extremists like Jack try to do is they're trying to create a space, kind of like Daryl Davis does to pull people out of the KKK. They're trying to pull guys out of that white supremacy and, create a space for them where they can see life beyond it and leaving it. So that's one difference I see. Okay, guys. Deanne says, I have to run. See you Monday later. I'll see you guys. Monday, I might have a special guest. I'll talk about it online. I've got to confirm this person, but I'm very excited. And we didn't have an interview this week, but I've got someone lined up for next week. That's going to be great. And just a reminder, if you're new here and you like the content, please hit subscribe to the channel. It helps with the numbers. You can hit like on the video. You can leave a comment. If you're a regular viewer and you want to support the channel, you can do so at Locals or Subscribestar, Patreon, or here at YouTube memberships. And let's see, somebody had some comments in the chat. I got a funny idea. Keri gives away 1 membership per month per swear. I can do that. Somebody needs to help stay on top of me and remind me. I'll have to get Pirate or someone to stay on top of me. Here, let me write this down. 1 membership a month per swear. I'm pretty good at not swearing very much, so this may not result in a lot of memberships. Maybe we should figure something else out that we do. But I would be guilty today, though, right? That was an accident. Anyway. I'm being silly, but I thought it was funny. Yeah, well, is Mystery Chris going to be in this podcast again soon? Yeah, Mystery Chris is on every Wednesday night for the Pop Culture Show. That's the show we do on Wednesdays at 8:00 Central. I might try and get him to guest on one of these these Kerfefe break shows on Mondays and Fridays again. It just depends on his schedule. But he'll be back this Wednesday, and he's actually coming over this week to meet with me, and we're going to be coming up with a lot of new ideas for the channel and ways to get things streamlined, which I'm excited about. So and plus I like seeing him in person. Okay, I hope you guys have a beautiful weekend. Thanks for hanging out. If you please hit like and subscribe and do all the things, and you can become a top fan. It's not too late to become a top fan at Deprogrammed Facebook page. Okay, guys. Talk to you later.